He looked me in the eyes, my own son, and said, "You're a burden, Mom." I stood there, speechless. 64 years of life, and I'd never felt pain like that. My name is Margaret Hale, and I never imagined I'd spend my golden years fighting the loneliness that came not from losing people, but from being abandoned by the very one I gave everything to. I was born and raised in Vermont, in a small town where winters were long, and love was supposed to be longer. My husband, David, passed away 8 years ago, a quiet man, a schoolteacher who loved his morning coffee and crossword puzzles. When he died, my world grew quieter, too, but not empty. Because I had Ethan, my only son. My reason to keep breathing. Ethan had always been my pride, a boy who dreamed big, studied hard, and promised me one day, "Mom, I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything again." I held on to those words like a lifeline. I sacrificed vacations, new clothes, and even my health sometimes, just to see him succeed. When he got into a good university in Boston, I remember sitting on the front porch, watching his car disappear down the road. I cried, but not out of sadness, it was joy. My baby was growing up. I worked part-time as a librarian after David's death. Life wasn't easy, but I managed. And when Ethan landed a high-paying tech job in Seattle, I couldn't stop smiling. He'd done it. My husband would have been proud. For years, our bond felt strong. He called me often, sent gifts on Mother's Day, and even flew home for Christmas, until he met Lily. Lily was beautiful, confident, young, the kind of woman who walks into a room and everyone notices. I was genuinely happy for him, at first. But slowly things changed. Calls grew shorter. Visits rarer. And when they married, I noticed the distance wasn't just miles anymore, it was emotional. When Ethan invited me to live with them after his father's death anniversary, I thought, maybe he misses me. Maybe he wanted family around again. I packed my suitcase with trembling hands, feeling like life had given me a second chance at belonging. At first, everything was fine. Their home in Seattle was modern, spotless, filled with the scent of lavender candles. Lily smiled politely, called me Mrs. Hale, and said she was glad to have me. But behind her polite tone, something cold lingered. I tried to be helpful, cooked dinners, folded laundry, watered plants. But one evening, I overheard her whisper in the kitchen. "Ethan, your mom's always around. Don't you think it's time she had her own place?" Those words cut deep, but I pretended not to hear. I didn't want to cause trouble. I told myself, maybe she's just stressed. But soon, Ethan started acting different too, distracted, impatient, like I was something in the way. The turning point came one quiet Sunday morning. I'd made pancakes, the kind he loved as a child. I set the table, waiting for him like I used to when he was little. But when he came down, he didn't sit. He didn't smile. He just stood there, arms folded. "Mom," he said, "Lily and I have been talking. You've been here a while, and maybe it's time you found your own place." I froze. "My own place?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Honey, I thought." He interrupted, sharp, impatient. "You're a burden, Mom. We need our space. You can't just live here forever." The plate in my hand slipped and shattered on the floor. I stared at him, at the same boy whose scraped knees I used to bandage, whose nightmares I chased away. My son, calling me a burden. Something inside me broke quietly, not with anger, but with heartbreak. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the rain smear across the glass, whispering, maybe he's right. Maybe I am a burden. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered back, "No, Margaret. You're not done yet." And the next morning, I packed my bags. When morning came, the rain had stopped. But inside me, it was still pouring. I looked around the guest room one last time. The pale blue walls, the photo of Ethan's wedding on the dresser, the folded blanket I'd crocheted for their couch. Everything in that house had a piece of me in it, and yet I didn't belong there anymore. I wrote a small note and placed it on the table. "Thank you for letting me stay. Don't worry, I'll be fine." It was short because anything longer would have turned into tears. I didn't wake them. I didn't want another goodbye that would sound empty. I quietly picked up my small suitcase, the same one I had used when Ethan was born, to pack for the hospital. Funny how life comes full circle, a mother walking out with the same bag she once carried to bring her son into the world. The Seattle air was cold, sharp, but it woke me up. I didn't have a plan, only a direction away. I called a cab and told the driver to take me to the bus terminal. He asked where I was going. I smiled faintly and said, "I'll know when I get there." As the bus rolled out of the city, I watched the skyline fade, tall glass towers shrinking in the distance, like the dreams I once had of growing old near my son. I pressed my forehead against the window and whispered, "You're free now, Margaret. Don't waste it." But freedom didn't feel like wings. It felt like falling. The bus took me to a small town in Oregon, surrounded by pine trees and quiet roads. I'd visited once with David years ago. Back then, we'd talked about retiring there someday. I got off at the last stop, suitcase in hand, heart trembling with the kind of fear only age understands, the fear of being alone in a world that moves faster than you do. I found a tiny motel with a flickering neon sign that read Rest Haven. The lady at the counter, Clara, looked at me with kind eyes. "You traveling alone, dear?" she asked. "Just finding my way," I replied. She smiled and said, "Aren't we all?" That night, I sat on the small bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me. I thought about all the times I'd scolded Ethan for not eating his vegetables, all the bedtime stories, all the birthdays where I'd stayed up baking his favorite cake. Every moment, all the love, now boiled down to one sentence: "You're a burden." I cried quietly, not the loud sobs of grief, but the kind that escape like whispers. The kind that ache in your bones. The next morning, I walked to a small cafe nearby. The smell of fresh coffee and muffins filled the air. The waitress, Nancy, must have seen something in my face because she poured me a cup and said, "You look like you could use a warm start." We talked about weather, about the town, about nothing and everything. And when I left, she slipped a paper napkin into my hand. On it, she'd written, "You remind me of my mom. Come by again." It was a small thing, but it warmed a corner of my heart that had gone cold. That week, I rented a small room in a shared home owned by an elderly couple, Helen and George. They'd lost their daughter years ago and said I reminded them of her. We ate dinner together sometimes, shared stories about our younger days, and for the first time in months, I really laughed. But every night when I lay in bed, Ethan's face would return, the look of irritation, the tone of finality. I wanted to hate him. I really did. But a mother's heart doesn't break evenly. It leaves pieces still clinging to love. One evening, as I walked by the lake near the edge of town, I saw the sunset painting the water gold. I whispered to David's memory, "He doesn't need me anymore, love, but maybe I still need me." And that's when it clicked. I had spent my whole life being someone's mother, someone's wife, someone's helper. But now, I needed to be Margaret again. That realization scared me, but it also set something free. The next day, I went to the community center where a notice board read, "Volunteers needed, senior reading program for kids." It felt like fate tapping on my shoulder. I signed up. My hands trembled as I filled in the form. It had been years since I'd written my name for something that was just for me. Little did I know, that small decision, that quiet act of self-worth, would change everything. Because while I was learning to rebuild my life from ashes, far away in Seattle, someone was realizing the emptiness of a home without a mother's warmth. It had been 3 months since I'd left Seattle. 3 months since I'd heard my son's voice. 3 months since the word burden stopped echoing in my head every night and started turning into something softer, a lesson. Life in that little Oregon town began to feel like a second chance, not a punishment. Every morning, I'd walk to the community center, where a dozen children waited eagerly for story hour. They called me Miss Maggie. Some sat cross-legged on the floor, others leaned in close when I read. Their laughter filled the room in ways my heart hadn't felt in years. There was this little girl, Sophie, barely 8, who once asked, "Miss Maggie, do you have any kids?" I hesitated. That question hit deeper than she knew. "Yes," I smiled softly, "I have a son." "Does he live here?" "No, sweetheart. But maybe one day he'll visit." She nodded as if that made perfect sense. Children never judge. They just accept. The seniors at the center became my friends. We shared meals, played cards, and sometimes just sat in silence together. There's something beautiful about quiet company. It doesn't demand explanations. One Sunday afternoon, Nancy, the cafe waitress who'd first welcomed me, invited me to a small farmer's market by the lake. I bought fresh apples, lavender soap, and a tiny handmade frame. On my way home, I printed an old photo of David and me to place inside. For the first time, my little rented room began to look like home. And yet, some nights, when I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan standing in that kitchen, his eyes cold, his voice sharp. I wondered if he ever thought about me. If he missed my voice, my cooking, my care. But I didn't allow those thoughts to linger. I'd promised myself not to cry for people who didn't value my presence. Then one evening, while I was folding laundry, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it until something inside whispered, "Pick up." "Hello." A pause. "Mom?" For a second, I couldn't breathe. I knew that voice instantly. My throat tightened. "Ethan?" "Yeah, it's me." The silence between us stretched long years of love and hurt tangled in a single moment. Finally, he spoke again, his voice trembling. I didn't know where you were. I called everyone. Why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" I laughed softly, the kind of laugh that hides pain. "You made it pretty clear you didn't want me there, Ethan." "Mom, that's not what I meant." "You said I was a burden," I interrupted, gently but firmly. "And I believed you. For a while." He sighed heavily, and for the first time, I heard something I hadn't in years: regret. "Lily left," he said quietly. That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "She said she couldn't deal with my temper, with how I treated you. She said I pushed away the only person who ever truly cared for me. I didn't know whether to feel pity or peace." "Ethan," I said after a moment, "people leave when we stop appreciating them. You learned it the hard way, so did I." He was silent again, then whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry. I was stupid. I thought I was doing the right thing, trying to live my life. But without you, the house feels empty." I closed my eyes. A tear slipped down my cheek, not out of sadness, but out of relief. Because those were the words I'd waited years to hear. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't the same woman who left his house crying into the rain. "Ethan, I forgive you," I said quietly. "But forgiveness doesn't always mean going back." He hesitated. "Can I see you? Please?" I didn't answer right away. My heart wanted to say yes, but my mind, wiser now, reminded me that love needs boundaries too. "Maybe," I said softly. "Someday. When it feels right." After we hung up, I sat in silence, the phone still warm in my hand. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. The sunset painted everything gold. I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The boy I raised is finally becoming a man, not because he's strong, but because he's learning to be humble." From that day on, Ethan called me every week. No demands. No guilt. Just conversations. He'd ask how I was, what books I was reading, how the children at the center were doing. And every call, I could hear his heart healing slowly, awkwardly, beautifully. But I didn't know that one phone call would soon lead to something I never expected, a moment that would test both our hearts in a way words alone couldn't fix. Because sometimes, life gives us one more chance, but it asks if we're brave enough to take it. It had been nearly a year since I'd walked out of Ethan's house. In that year, I learned to make coffee just for myself and not feel lonely. I learned to walk through town without wondering who noticed me. And most importantly, I learned that peace doesn't come from who you're with. It comes from what you accept within yourself. Life had become gentle again, morning tea on the porch, reading stories to children, helping Helen and George with their garden. Some evenings, I even joined the local seniors' music nights. We'd sing old country songs until our voices cracked with laughter. I wasn't rich. I wasn't surrounded by family. But I was alive, truly alive. Then, one cold autumn afternoon, I heard a knock at the door. Helen called from the kitchen, "Maggie, someone's here for you." I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the front room. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. It was Ethan. He looked different, thinner, older somehow, his face tired, eyes softer. He wasn't wearing the confident smile he once had. Instead, he looked small, vulnerable. "Mom," he whispered. I didn't say anything. The world seemed to pause between us. The wind carried the smell of pine and distant rain. Finally, I stepped aside and said, "Come in." He hesitated before entering, glancing around my small but cozy home. There were flowers on the table, photos of me and my new friends, a few drawings from the children at the reading center taped to the wall. He smiled faintly. "It's nice here." "It's home," I said softly. We sat at the small table. I poured him tea, the same way I always had when he was little. For a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself, like we were back in our old kitchen, before pride and pain built walls between us. He looked at me, eyes glistening. "Mom, I don't even know where to start." "Start where you left off," I said. His voice cracked. I was angry, lost. When Dad died, I didn't know how to be the man of the family. I thought I needed control. Lily kept telling me to set boundaries, to live my own life, and I confused that with shutting you out. "I'm so sorry." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back. "Ethan," I whispered, "you didn't just shut me out. You broke something that took me years to build: trust, love, belonging. But you're here now. That means something." He lowered his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not," I said gently. "But that's the thing about mothers. We forgive long before you ask." For a while, we just sat, two souls sharing silence, healing through it. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. "I sold the house," he said. My eyes widened. "You? What?" "It never felt like home after you left. I'm moving back to Vermont. I want to start over, somewhere simple. Somewhere real. And I want you there, Mom. If you'll come." My heart twisted. The thought of Vermont, the place where David and I had built our lives, brought back so many memories. But I also thought of Oregon, of the faces that had become family, of the children who waited for me every morning, of the woman I'd finally rediscovered. I smiled through tears. "Ethan, I love you. But I've already built my new beginning here. I can visit, but I won't leave my peace behind again." He nodded slowly, pain flickering behind his understanding. "I get it," he said. "I just wanted you to know the door's always open." I reached across the table and took his hand. "That's all I ever wanted from you, an open door." When he left that evening, he hugged me tight, tighter than he had since he was a child. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I know," I said. "And I love you too. But love means letting each other live freely." As his car disappeared down the dirt road, I stood on the porch, the wind tugging at my hair, the orange glow of sunset painting the sky. For the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt complete. I'd walked out broken, and now I stood strong, not because someone came back, but because I came back to myself. The days after Ethan's visit felt quieter, but in a good way. Not the heavy silence of sadness, the peaceful kind, like the world finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Sometimes I'd replay that knock on the door in my mind, his face, his trembling voice, the tears he didn't try to hide. For years, I had prayed for him to understand what I felt. And when that moment finally came, I realized something profound. I didn't need him to complete me anymore. I only needed him to see me. And he did. That was enough. Every morning, I walked down to the lake. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, the kind of freshness that reminds you life keeps moving no matter how long you pause. Children waved when they saw me. Neighbors greeted me by name. Even the barista at the cafe began calling my usual order the Maggie Special. This little town had become my family, not by blood, but by kindness. And that's the family that never leaves you. One afternoon, while sorting books at the community center, I found an old poem tucked inside a novel. It read, "The nest empties, but the sky remains wide." I smiled. That one line captured everything I had learned. We raise our children, we pour ourselves into their futures, and one day, they fly. Sometimes gracefully, sometimes painfully. But our purpose doesn't end there. The sky is still ours to soar into. That night, I wrote a letter to Ethan. I didn't send it, I just needed to write it. My dear son, I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I want peace in my heart. You gave me life's hardest lesson, that love must come with respect. And now that you've learned it too, I'm proud of the man you're becoming. Remember, you can't lose what you never stop loving. And no matter where you go, your mother's prayers walk a few steps ahead of you. When I folded the letter and placed it in my journal, I felt lighter, as if I had finally put down a weight I'd been carrying for years. Winter came again, soft and white. I decorated the small porch with twinkling lights and baked cookies for the kids who came by caroling. For the first time in forever, I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up. I was content where I was. On Christmas morning, a small parcel arrived by mail. Inside was a framed photo Ethan and me, from when he was 6 years old, both of us covered in flour, laughing in the kitchen. Below it, a note in his handwriting. You were never a burden, Mom. You were my foundation. Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they didn't burn, they healed. Because I finally believed it. I placed the photo beside David's on the table and whispered, "We did our best, love. And that's enough." The wind brushed against the window, carrying the sound of children laughing outside. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. I thought of all the women like me, mothers who gave too much, stayed too long, loved too deeply. To them, I'd say this. If they call you a burden, remember, you carried them once. If they forget your worth, remember, you built theirs. And if they turn away, walk out with grace. Because sometimes, walking away isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of self-respect. That's my story. I didn't walk out to make my son chase me. I walked out so I could find me. And when he came back, I realized love doesn't win through guilt or pain, it wins through growth. Today, I still visit Vermont sometimes. Ethan and I share long phone calls now, no anger, no distance, just quiet understanding. He's learning to cook, can you believe that? He says he finally understands why I used to hum while stirring soup. It made the house feel alive, he told me. And that's when I knew. No matter how far apart we go, a mother's love leaves echoes, not chains. As I stand by the lake watching the sunset melt into the horizon, I whisper softly, "You're not a burden, Margaret. You never were." And in that moment, surrounded by silence, by peace, by everything I rebuilt, I finally feel what I'd been searching for all along. Freedom, forgiveness, and a heart that still knows how to love.